Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. They pinned an old man against the wall, but when they saw the general, everything changed. On a gray afternoon, the clouds hanging above Brookside, a popular and formerly working-class district of Chicago, seemed to hold the light like a secret. The air was humid, laden with the smell of damp asphalt and stale bread. Passers-by walked quickly, eager to avoid the rain, headphones in their ears or eyes fixed on their phones. But amidst this modern bustle, a singular figure advanced slowly, dignified and silent, like a living memory passing through a world that had almost forgotten it. It was Henry McCall, 74 years old. A black man with a weathered face, every wrinkle telling a story. A finely trimmed mustache, dark, deep eyes, full of lucidity but also a certain fatigue. He wore a long khaki military coat, threadbare at the wrists, with barely visible insignia. On his head, a faded cap proudly bore the inscription embroidered in gold letters. U.S. Army Veteran, Desert Storm. A symbol that few young people recognized, but which meant everything to him. His handmade wooden cane tapped gently against the pavement with almost musical regularity. Tack. 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 With each step, he seemed to measure the ground, not out of fear of falling, but out of respect for the streets he had seen change so much. Streets where he had grown up, loved, lost, and then grown old. Once strong and straight as a pillar, Henry was now bent by the years, aching knees, and memories that weighed too much on him. Yet he walked with dignity. Not to be noticed, but because he had survived. War. Discrimination. Oblivion. He lived alone, in a small apartment in the block 52, 2 blocks up, above a laundromat. The ceiling creaked when the buses passed, and the heater made a banging noise, but this was home. His wife, Claudine, had been dead for 10 years. His children lived far away, scattered between Arizona and Georgia. He received occasional calls, sometimes photos. But his daily life was punctuated by simple rituals. Every Tuesday, Henry would walk down to the grocery store. Mr. Alvarez, a jovial Cuban with whom he always exchanged a few words in broken Spanish. He bought rye bread, a jar of jam, coffee, sometimes a little canned corn, and an orange. Always just one. For the taste, not the quantity. On the way, he greeted Miss Lorraine, who was still selling wilted flowers on the sidewalk, and Jimmy, a young barber who trimmed his beard for free on the first Saturday of the month. In this changing neighborhood, where old buildings were being replaced by gray, soulless lofts, Henry was a familiar figure, almost sacred to some. A walking memory. But that day. This day was not going to be like any other. That Tuesday, without him knowing it yet, a simple walk would become a moment of national shame. In an aging patrol car parked on the corner of 34th Street, 2 young uniformed police officers absent-mindedly watched the passers-by. The officer Travis Miller, 25 years old, his features still fresh, but his gaze already hardened by a few months of service, looked out the window, nervously chewing gum. At his side, the officer Jake Connors, a little calmer but visibly tense, tapped his fingertips on the steering wheel. "Do you see the old man over there?" Miller murmured, nodding his chin at a figure slowly moving along the sidewalk opposite. Henry McCall, in his long khaki coat and carrying a cane, walked at his own pace, looking tired but dignified. His grocery bag hung limply from his arm. "Yeah. Military coat, cane, bag," Connors replied, frowning. "Did you see how he's looking around? It's suspicious, isn't it?" Miller nodded, his eyes scrutinizing. "Yeah, he's a little too nervous. Maybe he's hiding something. Shall we check?" "Come on, let's go." They exchanged a knowing glance, then opened the door simultaneously. The slam echoed through the nearly empty street. The 2 men stepped out quickly, hands ready to draw, radios in hand, ready to call for backup. Henry looked up in surprise, not understanding what was happening to him. "Sir, stop immediately, hands up," Miller ordered in a firm, but lacking gentle, voice. "I I'm going home, officers. Is there a problem? Henry replied in a trembling voice, mingled with astonishment. Before he could say another word, Miller grabbed his shoulder forcefully and slammed him against the red brick wall of a decrepit old building. The grocery bag fell to the ground with a thud, releasing a few apples that rolled and came to rest on the cracked asphalt. Connors, a little clumsily, placed his hand on Henry's waist, beginning to search him, his gaze searching for something he didn't have. Henry, taken aback, remained motionless, panting, his trembling hands pressed against the cold wall. We received a call regarding a suspect matching your description. Remain calm. Connors tried to explain, trying to maintain some semblance of control. I'm a former soldier. I just went to buy some bread, Henry murmured, his eyes full of suppressed pain. Around them, passers-by began to stop. Some whispered to each other, others took out their phones. A man in his 30s, hidden behind a lamppost, discreetly filmed the scene. His thumb pressed the record button without missing a beat. Suddenly, a voice rose from the other side of the street, full of indignation. It's Mr. McCall. He's respected here. You can't do this. A middle-aged woman, her face marked by years, stepped forward, shaking her head angrily. But the police, their eyes fixed on their suspect, didn't even look at her. They were convinced they were dealing with a danger, a suspicious element. They wouldn't listen. The tension was rising, palpable. The silence of the street was now broken by the presence of a man unjustly treated, and a silent but vigilant community. Suddenly, a dull rumble echoed through the street, attracting everyone's attention. An official vehicle appeared around the corner of 34th Street, braking abruptly with a high-pitched screech that shattered the emerging calm. It was a black sedan with tinted windows and government insignia. Passers-by froze, curious. The driver's door opened authoritatively, revealing an imposing man of perfect military stature. His impeccably pressed uniform proudly bore the decorations of a high-ranking officer. This man's face, dark and determined, was marked by years of discipline, combat, and responsibility. His eyes burned with cold anger. General Elijah D. Hargrave, commander of the U.S. Army Reserve and one of the highest-ranking African-American officers in the country, had just arrived. He was on his way to a ceremony at the Veterans Center a few blocks away, but what he had just seen made his heart sink. He had encountered this scene like a painful flash. His step became heavy, determined, as he strode closer, sweeping away the murmurs of the crowd with the sheer force of his presence. His voice, deep and authoritative, tore through the air like a detonation. Let go of this man immediately. The surprised police officers turned slowly around, their faces ashen, trapped. Sir, this scene does not concern you, please, Miller tried, hesitant, trying to regain control. But the general, implacable, cut him off sharply. Silence. This man's name is Henry McCall. He saved my life in Iraq in 1991. He's a decorated hero. And you dare slam him against a wall like a criminal? The blood seemed to drain from Miller and Connors' faces. Their hands trembled, and they bowed their heads in shame. General, we didn't know, Connors stammered, the words catching in his throat. That's the problem. You don't know anything. You see an old black man with a cane and you assume he's suspicious. You've let your prejudices guide your actions, and that's unacceptable. Henry, still leaning against the cold wall, slowly raised his head. His tired gaze met the general's, filled with deep gratitude. Hello, Elijah, he whispered in a hoarse but warm voice. The general knelt beside him, gently running a firm hand over his arm, helping him straighten. Henry gripped his cane harder, straightening despite the pain. The two young police officers remained motionless, almost frozen, the weight of their mistake crushing their pride. They avoided the gaze of witnesses, passers-by, and especially that of the general, who never took his eyes off them. A heavy silence reigned around them. The crowd held its breath, aware that it was witnessing a historic moment. General Hargrave, a symbol of courage and honor, had just reminded the old man of the dignity he had always deserved. The scene, captured by a discreet but attentive passerby, was quickly posted online under the evocative title. They handcuffed a veteran, then saw the general. In less than 24 hours, the video went viral. Millions of people across the United States watched it, shared it, and commented with anger and dismay. Social media was ablaze with outraged, often poignant, messages. They didn't even take the time to talk to him. A disgrace. This is why we talk about systemic racial profiling. This is not an isolated case. Honor your veterans. Don't humiliate them in the street. This old gentleman is a hero, not a suspect. Hashtags like #RespectHenry and #JusticeForVeterans flooded Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Influencers, public figures, and veterans themselves spoke out to denounce the injustice. A wave of outrage quickly rose in the city of Chicago. Peaceful protests were quickly organized in front of the local police station. Former uniformed service members spoke to an attentive crowd, recalling the sacrifice of their brothers in arms and calling for sweeping reforms in police training and culture. General Elijah D. Hargrave, for his part, made an official statement widely reported by the media. This country must protect those who defended it. Henry McCall is a hero. What he experienced is unacceptable, intolerable. We must unite to ensure that no veteran, or anyone else, is ever treated this way again. In response to public pressure and an internal investigation, the two young officers, Miller and Connors, were immediately suspended. Disciplinary proceedings were initiated, followed by mandatory training on bias and respect for civil rights. In a public ceremony at City Hall, the mayor of Chicago formally apologized to Henry McCall, surrounded by community representatives and veterans. The entire room rose to applaud this man who, despite his humiliation, had held his head high. But Henry, true to himself, did not seek revenge or resentment. In a calm whisper, in front of the microphones and cameras, he declared, "I don't want their ruin. I want their conscience. For them to learn. For them to look beyond skin color, beyond prejudice. For them to see humanity, quite simply." In the following weeks, in tribute to this moment of justice and remembrance, a square in the neighborhood was renamed Place Henry McCall. An engraved plaque was placed at the foot of a 100-year-old oak tree, bearing the inscription, "To those who fight for a country, even when they are not always well received by it." One autumn morning, as the sun rose gently over Brookside, Henry sat on a stone bench in the square he now called home, watching the children running, laughing, and playing among the fallen leaves. Beside him, General Hargrave, in civilian clothes, handed him a steaming cup of coffee. "You know, Henry. Even after all these years, you continue to teach this country what honor truly means." Henry smiled softly, gazing into the distance, toward a still horizon. "I'm not looking for honor. I just want a man to one day no longer need to show off his medals to be respected." A peaceful silence enveloped the two men, accomplices in a story greater than their names.